I cannot share your accolades and, all the wonderful things you've done as well as you can. So just to kick this off, share a little bit about yourself, please, how you got to where you are now, what you're doing, all those great things. And we're going to keep this casual. So don't feel like you have to answer every question. We're going to go where the conversation takes us. So Betsy, you're the first person I see in our window. Do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Betsy Hauser. I'm the CEO and founder of Tech Talent South. Tech Talent South, you probably have heard of throughout the day, but we are a talent pipelining business for primarily Fortune 250 companies. Do you want a little bit of background too?
Oh, yeah. If you want to share a little bit about what brought you here, because I know your journey is kind of awesome too.
So previous to TTS, I actually ran a physical product development company here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We were in the business of executing ideas, so building out people's kooky ideas. And I always want to highlight that we were service-based. So we executed, we did not judge them. So we made some very bizarre stuff. But it was really fun. Even to this day, I think I geek out more with tangible products. But that company sold to a company here called Inventus, product development company. If you've heard of the TV show Everyday Edison, it's kind of the PBS version of Shark Tank. They're headquartered here in Charlotte. So we sold to them, and I kind of caught the tech bug. I was seeing all my friends in Charlotte build out these amazing startups. They were able to, build prototypes for, the cost to host and domain, $40, right? It was so empowering compared to the time and the resources it took to start a physical product. So I actually took off to Chicago. I learned how to code. And 6 months later, I said, well, why did I have to go all the way to Chicago for this experience? And launched TTS in the South. And then we quickly expanded to 12 markets over 7 states.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Kim, you're the next person I see on the screen. Would you want to share a little bit about your background and what you do?
Can you hear me?
Now I can. Yeah. Hey.
Okay. Hey. So thanks for having me on, Mary. Really appreciate it. So I'm Kim Daroca. I work for DXC Technology in New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm a learning experience designer, which is a pretty new field that is coming up. So actually watching our last presenter was Myra was fascinating. I'm really, really intrigued, fascinated by what she's doing. So thanks for putting that together. I have 6 years experience in learning and development, specifically for IT. And I've been with DXC for the past 2 years on their global team. Before joining DXC, I also had experience on a software development team doing a number of different roles. Small teams, you may know, you wear a lot of hats. And I was no exception. I was doing technical writing for them, UX design, all of the training. So a lot of different hats, a lot of really great experiences, really working with, directly with engineers and really understanding how to solve client problems from the ground floor. I also, I got to know Mary through a really great program that DXC has been working on, which is the DXC Higher Education Program in Louisiana, which really champions taking a look at how we're teaching technology in Louisiana and how we can improve it to make sure that companies are going to be attracted to come down to Louisiana and really get Louisiana becoming the Silicon Bayou. That's the word I was looking for. I had the great fortune of working for a year with this program and developing it out from the ground floor. Now it's off and running, and my latest venture is I've been working with a global team in the Center of Excellence, developing out design thinking programs for the global DXC organization. So really exciting to be here. I'm very excited to learn more about you guys as well. So I'll pass it on.
Thanks, Kim.
Can I interrupt for a second and apologize? I just had my first webinar snafu. So one of the attendees said hi to me, and I said hi to every single person back. So I probably distracted everybody. More of that to come.
We're all learning in the new norm.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Kim, for sharing. Ariel, would love to hear about your background and, how you got to where you are today and what you're currently working on.
Yeah, for sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I just love the sound of Silicon Bayou, by the way, Kim. Like, I just moved to Atlanta from New York, so I'm used to Silicon Alley versus the Valley. And it's just always interesting to see how new cities are doing their take on it. But my name is Ariel Lopez. I am actually a former tech recruiter turned career coach, now entrepreneur. I'm the founder and CEO of Knac, which is a hiring platform that helps companies to better screen, manage, and give feedback to applicants in their pipeline. We are hyper-focused on improving the candidate experience for everyone. So you don't get ghosted in your job search or get canned rejection emails that you don't understand. Prior to launching Knac, I actually worked at General Assembly. So I love all things ed tech. I love all things boot camp. I'm very passionate about helping to, fill this massive skills gap that exists within the market today. I think the pandemic is honestly just amplifying a lot of the problems that we already knew were existing. So I'm really interested to see how this shapes the future of work.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. My first question, and really the heart of why we're here today, what are the greatest challenges CIOs face in tech talent acquisition and retention? Whoever wants to go first.
I can start. Certainly, I think it's the amount of talent that's even out there. So we have, there's an impossibility of filling these technical roles with CS degrees. There just aren't enough. And I've been having some interesting conversations over the last couple of days and love to hear what the other panelists have say that I think that's going to be exacerbated. So I've been hearing from some universities, et cetera, that fall enrollment is dropping off dramatically, which means even less of those. So CIOs really need to think outside of the box when they're recruiting technical talent, and how can they find, smart people with aptitude and sort of equip them with those technical chops that are necessary to do the job.
Absolutely. I would add in on top of, finding the people, it's also thinking about the channels in which you're finding them. And I think one of the biggest challenges is the abundance of tools that exist. I think it's going to be really hard for CIOs to figure out what makes the most sense for their organization. I think top of funnel in terms of user acquisition, learning how to evaluate talent is going to be challenging during this time, right? Like, no one's doing on-site interviews. No one's, going to South by Southwest to, do the career fair to meet you in person. So when I've been having conversations with, recruiters at companies that we work with, they're just wondering, like, okay, how do we qualify someone? How do we tell if someone's good if we aren't able to actually conduct the hiring process as we usually conduct it? And then I think as far as retention, it's just, how do you onboard now, right? You're not bringing people to the office anymore. You're not giving them that white glove experience. So I think it's going to be interesting how companies find ways to offset that. And then also, helping employees that already exist within the organization adapt to this new normal. I would like to say that most of us in tech are kind of used to working remotely. So it's not like a completely new thing. But for it to be an everyday thing, I think is very new. So helping people to have a sense of belonging and have a sense of community beyond Slack, I think is going to be pretty challenging too.
Yeah, I just want to echo that to say that really the assessment piece has always been the challenge that I've seen when we're talking about how do we really know that someone is up to doing the job. It really always comes down to we can talk with them and we can test their knowledge as much as we want, but can they produce? When they get in front of a client, can they actually explain the problem clearly and well, and not just in technical terms, but in business terms as well. It's one thing when you see somebody on paper that looks perfect, but how are they going to work in a team? And that's really some of the greatest challenges, we've seen that we've been walking through. And then you had an interesting point also about how do you keep people when community is so important, and you're so remote, and your teams are, if you're working in an agile environment, prioritizing face-to-face time is so important. And many of our tech companies, are really agile in nature. Getting over that hump of how can we still make that inclusion, make that face-to-face tangible while still being so far away from one another. So.
Great. Well, another fun question for y'all. Why are past talent acquisition models failing us today? And how do they need to change to meet the growing demand for tech talent?
What's interesting, one of the things we've done to sort of alleviate, I think, some of the past challenges, and Kim has brought up assessment, and everybody has, I think. We have been, pipelining liberal arts grads primarily over to programs like our Graduate Accelerator program, which is essentially 100 hours of foundational full stack development. So we have data, not just weekly technical assessments, right? So they're doing, hacker rank assessments, et cetera, but they're also being evaluated on additional skills, leadership, ability to, communicate, et cetera. And we have that over 100 hours before we ever even pipeline them over to a corporate partner. Basically stacking the deck. We know these are the right people before we even show them to our partners, kind of alleviating some of the issues that were mentioned before.
As you asked the question, I was like coming up with a laundry list of things. I'm like, oh wow, where do we start? The thing I actually think I talk about the most these days is what I like to call avoiding the black hole, i.e. how every company is not using their ATS the way that they should be using it, and how it's a major blocker for people that are trying to break in. More specifically, companies are inundated with the volume of applications that they receive. So it's seemingly impossible for them to screen everyone that's coming in their pipeline. So if you're getting 10,000 applications per role, even if someone's overly qualified, if you never look at their application in the first place, you wouldn't know. And that's what's happening right now. Companies are overlooking the majority of the people in their pipeline. And because that's the case, they have a tendency to pattern match. They have a tendency to rely on referrals. And this is why tech has such a big diversity problem today, is because, productivity has frankly compromised thoughtfulness. And I am always curious to figure out, how companies are going to better challenge themselves to evaluate the people that are in their pipelines, really rethink what qualified means for their positions. How are they communicating that to the public, right? Instead of these crappy job descriptions that people have to decipher to figure out, oh, I think I'm a good fit, but I'm not really sure, right? Like, everyone has a role to play in closing the skills gap. And I think companies are really going to have to step up in figuring out what that means for them. So not only preparing, this future workforce, but also making sure that their current employees are getting reskilled and they're prepared for what's coming around the bend tomorrow. So I think all of that to say, companies can do a way better job just in their hiring process. And I also think they need to do a better job in making it transparent to job seekers what matters to them.
Can I tell a quick story? Ariel just made me think of it. So early on in TTS's history, when we did one of our first corporate deals, we were submitting like student profiles for approval for this large organization, very big company. And they stack ranked them, and they did exactly what you said. So they put all the CS degrees on top. And the reality is these people had them in place. So if you're really thinking strategically, those maybe aren't the top tier folks. And I did what is the most morbid thing you could possibly do, right? I get the stack rank back and I flip to the very back page. I'm like, who did they think was the worst? And I looked at him, and y'all, this guy is brilliant. He is an amazing communicator, but they were looking at specific skills and not at aptitude, etc. And I told them, hey, this was a fascinating experience to me, and you're going to learn about us and our talent. We're going to learn about you, and you're going to have to trust us. This is wrong. Like, reverse this list. And they ended up offering him a job, and he's still there to this day.
Wow.
I'm glad to hear the happy ending to that story.
Yeah, to piggyback on what you both have been saying is, I think that before you even get to the recruiting piece, a company, especially like a service-based company that is providing customized solutions for clients, one of the biggest challenges is that they may not know what talent they need before they get to the recruiting phase, right? They might know that they have, something coming in the door, and might have ideas on, how many developers they're going to need, or how many Scrum Masters they're going to need to employ, or they're going to, probably be, going with an AWS solution, or they might be going, with a website for the solution. But in this agile environment that we've been creating, right, in the tech world, we've been creating a lot of open space for people to explore solutions in a lot of different ways, which really makes it so that our talent has to be able to be flexible enough to walk into different roles and understand different technologies. And that also means that the business might not know exactly who they're looking for at the time. So they're just making their best guess, which is what I tend to see on a day-to-day challenge is, how are you matching up the opportunity with the right person? Well, you have to know what problem you're solving. So that's probably the thing from the company perspective that I would say.
That's great. I want to talk about poaching for a little bit. I know I see this a lot. I have a recruiter friend in New Orleans who gave me this statistic. I think it's about 1 year a tech professional expects to stay in their current role at that current business. So they expect to be in a different job somewhere else in the next year, which is just mind-boggling to me. And I would love to hear what you think the pros and cons are of poaching tech talent from your competitors.
Kim, this screams you.
Okay. I can at least say, from the standpoint of a large companies succeed when there are other large companies around to poach talent. And it sounds counterintuitive, but it's because when you are having people jump between companies, they're learning new skills, and they're learning new ways to engage, new processes. They're understanding, maybe company A is doing, a design thinking process that, has very structured, tools that they're using. Maybe company B is still formulating some of these, and that bounce back and forth really shares and pollinates ideas. And there's, of course, a lot of downsides. If I talk about just from a team's perspective, the biggest downside is that when you're working with small teams that are trying to deliver products to companies, what you're losing is that integration. When the culture is for someone to stick around for, 6 months, a year, 2 years, what you're losing is that interlock that you've been building and that you've been working on. You're losing that trust that you've built. So I'm all for skill sharing. I'm all for cross-pollination, but I'm also for teams that work well together. So I don't know. There's a lot of good, positive and negatives. I'll back out of that one now.
I mean, I would add that I mean, I don't think anyone's really going to have an option on whether not to poach, right? Like, we're facing massive layoffs, right? Like, we have to be really realistic with what's happening within the market today. And the reality is some people are going to make it and some companies aren't. So I think the companies that are thinking, or at least trying to maintain, you know, being competitive, are thinking about how do we kind of get to the talent first before they end up somewhere else, right? So I think strategically thinking, you should be thinking about your headcount. You should be thinking about your forecast. If the business is going to change, whether it's a minor pivot or you're launching new products or features, like it's always important to think about how you're going to staff up to make those moves. So I would argue that, I mean, I think there's positives, but I also think you really don't have the option not to with what we're about to kind of head into. And I always think, honestly, the biggest positive is probably for the job seeker, right? Like, anytime you're making a move, you're giving yourself a chance to level up and learn new skills. And ultimately, that helps you advance in your career.
You know, one thing I would add, I completely agree with them, but from sort of a different perspective is sort of thinking about how can we reskill folks within our org and create this sort of loyalty where they stay longer. So I think of places like Home Depot, right, where they built out the orange method and they're training folks within the org to stay there and move into software development roles. You know, we help folks do that at TTS too. And so those people, at least in my experience, have had this sort of gratitude for, hey, like, thanks for taking this leap of faith and giving me this opportunity to learn and grow. They already know the culture. They know the ins and outs of the company. So I think thinking about, you know, different initiatives like that within larger orgs will help lessen sort of the back and forth and just the salary hikes.
You know, I love to hear that, Betsy.
Great. Just here to stroke some egos, you know?
Hey, learning and development doesn't get a lot of time to shine, so I appreciate it.
I mean, to be fair, just so everyone knows, I'm really good. So Zach, holler at ya. I see you from Home Depot in our participating right now.
Awesome.
Well, that's actually a really great segue into another topic I want to cover with y'all. So it's not enough just to hire great talent, but really the goal is to retain that talent, right? So what makes tech talent want to stay with an organization?
Teach them. I think the saying goes, you know, treat someone so well that, or train them so well that they can leave and take any job. Treat them so well that they don't want to. And I mean, training isn't enough. Managers need to make sure that people have the opportunities to use that training and to apply what they've learned in new and exciting roles that they are interested in, they are engaged in, making sure that they are treated as people and that they have a vested interest in their success, right? So I think the first thing when you want to look at it is, in order to retain people, you have to have great managers. In order to have great managers, you have to have a great culture. In order to have great culture, you have to have a lot of trust and empathy. So I'll leave it at that for now, and I'll back up.
Yes to everything Kim said. I feel like that was the beginning to a great handbook. I personally would say room for growth is like the number one thing. More specifically, like road mapping. Do employees have a clear idea of what a trajectory looks like for them within the organization? And I'm always shocked when I talk to people at companies and the answer is no, right? Like, they kind of depend on the hiring managers and team leads to kind of have those conversations. And, you know, that's not really fostering an environment for growth. I would definitely add on to that, if you're thinking under the lens of diversity, and this will continue to be a hot topic, you know, how are we making sure that women and people of color and people that are underrepresented are in management roles and in leadership roles. I don't talk to any companies that have issues finding entry-level talent, right? It's always, hey, when it gets to mid and senior level talent, there's a breakdown and we don't really know what to do. And the advice is always, well, how are you building a process internally to foster that growth so employees can grow into those management positions, right? Like, is there some kind of incentive-based plan, or maybe you're eligible to apply for a management role once you spend a year at a company, right? I think one of the exciting things, not that there's really many exciting things about this pandemic, but I think one of the silver linings is we are creating the new normal, right? Like, when all of this blows over, I think, you know, from an HR perspective, there's so many things that can be ushered in at this point that maybe it didn't make sense to do a year ago or 5 years ago, and now is the time to do it. So I would say, like, remain open, but ultimately I think people are looking for places that they can grow, and that, you know, help them advance in their careers the way that they're looking to.
Well, I know we only have, another 15 plus minutes left in this panel, so we will leave time for Q&A for all of you listening. This is a great time to start submitting those questions. We'll get to you in just a moment. I do want to dive a little bit into learning and development. Kim, this will be definitely your wheelhouse. So tech is constantly changing, and it's a field that requires lifelong learning. So what can educators do to equip talent today with the skills needed to build tomorrow's tech? And Betsy and Ariel, I know you all have a lot to say about this too.
The biggest thing when we were talking with, we worked with 7 different universities. And when we talked to them, we really got down to the practical application, right? It's knowing the theory is great, and it's necessary in a lot of different applications. But when you get into the working world, it's not just enough to know the theory. You have to know how to apply it. You have to know what tools to use. You have to understand how they interlock together, understanding basic principles of DevOps, and, you know, a supply chain, understanding, you know, continuous integration and continuous delivery. Those are fundamental to what we need in our industry now. Those are just standard. And if you're not learning that in your classroom, then there's a problem, because that is how you are going to be working in the working world. And I truly believe that you should understand, when you walk in day one, you should understand what you're walking into at a very basic level of, you know, how to do your job. And one of the biggest things that we talked to a lot of students, and one of the biggest things that they said that they didn't know before they got to a company was how to release a product, right? When they made a great app, they went through the process, all of these different projects, and then they didn't know what to do with it once they had to deliver it to a client. So it seems like a simple thing, but just really looking at, how would they work with a client from the beginning to the end is so important in our education that we're really lacking right now.
Definitely agree with everything Kim said. One of the things I've seen with universities, and Kim, I don't know if you've seen this too, but it's been really interesting to me to see how, these are really smart people that are working within these organizations, right? The issue is it's really hard to turn a ship of that size. They know they need to make those changes. It's just very difficult. So I've been really impressed with so many of the schools that are, really thinking outside the box now. They're partnering with organizations like Tech Talent South and Trilogy, et cetera. Folks are coming from the Davidsons, the Emerys, the Kenyans, and going through our graduate accelerator program, because then they sort of get the best of both worlds, right? They get that theory and hopefully some applied skills within their courses. And then in addition, they get this very focused technical experience. And it has been really refreshing. And I think it's been a shift even of the last 5 years while I was at TTS, to see the change in the way universities are working with outside partners and their realization that the sort of hard skills are really important.
I totally agree. My first thought was collaboration with the market. Like, if you aren't working with the market, if you aren't executing based off of industry insights, like, what are we even doing? So my hope is that all educators are, thinking about whether it's like curriculum.
Having a hard time hearing you. Are you all hearing Ariel okay?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better. Awesome.
Yay, we're back. No, I was just saying, as far as collaboration with the market, whether it's just figuring out how you're going to change your curriculum going forward based off of what the industry needs, or actually implementing those real life projects into the classroom, I think that's extremely important. And I would say for the students' benefit, just helping people to understand pathways. I'm very big on road mapping, if you haven't got on yet. And it's largely because people are unaware of what opportunities make sense for them, right? So if you are the person that has a liberal arts degree, or if you got that business management degree, or you have that finance degree and you're a program manager at JP Morgan and you hate your life, sorry if anyone from JP Morgan is on the line, I hear it's not that bad. But you're trying to figure out, how do I transition over? I really want to be working at Instagram. I'd much rather be working at TikTok or whatever, right? Like, I just find that most people have no clue what makes sense for them based off of their education, based off of the skill set that they actually have, and where they want to go. So I think every educator, even down to your CS students, maybe they don't want to be a developer long term, right? Like, what are we doing to educate them about everything that's parallel to that would make sense for them? And I talk to a lot of job seekers that get get confused when it's a little too late, after they've paid $10,000 to go learn the skill, and they're like, okay, what do I do now, right? Like, how can we help usher in some guidance a little bit sooner in that process?
That's great. And I would also love, while we're on this topic, to explore how CIOs can stay ahead of that curve, and how can they build a team now that is able to build tomorrow's tech.
I'll say, the obvious answer is teach them, but it's beyond that. It's give them the space to learn. A lot of problems that we're seeing is that you can assign people, thousands of hours of training, but if you don't give them the time to take that training, and if you don't give them the time to, work on new projects that allow them to apply the training, then you're never going to innovate. So if you want to be innovative, you have to allow your people the space to be innovative, and you have to allow them the space to fail. A lot of companies, we say that we're in a fail fast method, but if you're not actually sticking with it, if you're not letting your teams explore and fall on their face, then you're never going to see where the edges of possibility are.
Well, if there are no other thoughts on that one, I have one last question for y'all before we open up for audience Q&A. For the aspiring technologist who's tuned in, I know y'all are there. How can the individual hailing from a non-technical background build relevant competitive skills and then break into the industry?
I absolutely, everyone knows this is like my greatest soapbox, that Folks from non-technical backgrounds can be given technical chops. In fact, I think that's the easy part. I think the other pieces are a lot harder to teach. I assume Kim would agree with me, but she's the learning expert. So when you have those, teaching the technical chops, it's just a matter of time and persistence, right? We always say at TTS, you know, if you came from an art history background and you're sitting beside someone that had a CS degree, sure, that person may be ahead of you in certain topics, but there are going to be days that that person wants to throw their computer out the window, and there are going to be days that you want to. It's a healthy amount of overwhelming for everyone to learn new languages, but the reality is it's absolutely achievable. And many of those people with diverse backgrounds are interesting within organizations. They come with a different perspective. I mean, I reference folks all the time that come with like dance and art and music backgrounds, and, you know, they round out. And when you're building products for all people, you really want the voice of all people in those products.
I'd just like to echo that and say that one of our senior blockchain experts in DXC, he had a PhD in music. So I am absolutely a champion of people from different backgrounds. I myself do not have a technical background. It is more accessible than you think, and it is more about the research that you put in and about not being scared by terminology, not being scared by, you know, a lot of people think, well, you know, I'm not, you know, the geeky type, or, you know, I'm not, you know, I don't fit that mold. Throw the mold out the window. There's room for everybody here, because when it comes down to all technology is problem solving. And the experience that you have in your background helps you to be a different problem solver. It helps you to bring different ideas to the table that, you know, someone else couldn't have seen before. What I also wanted to talk about a little bit is, if you don't have a technical background, it is incredibly useful and incredibly important for you to look through and research online certifications or any sort of portfolio building that you can do. I like to tell people, treat tech like you are applying for an art job. Create a portfolio that's visual and engaging and shows your talent. It's not enough just to say, you know, what you've learned, but show what you've learned. Take some of those you know, home projects and actually put them in a way that people can see them and can get tangible with them. That's the best way to really show people what you know, is to actually show them. Be visual, be engaging, and don't be scared.
You know, I would add one more thing. Kim said, you know, it's kind of good to stand out. And I always tell people that if you come from a different background than the folks around you, look, that's not a disadvantage. That's an advantage, and you're the person everybody's going to remember.
Absolutely. I think, to echo a few things as far as that being your advantage, my advice to everyone is to really spend time creating your narrative and figure out the story that you want to tell. Because if you don't, recruiters will make up a story, and they do it all the time, right? Like, your job is to make sure that they don't misjudge you. And I think the easiest way to do that is to have a killer portfolio, find ways to showcase your skills. One of my soapboxes is that non-technical roles at tech companies are still technical roles. So, you know, for the person that is unsure about, let's say, web development, oh my God, there's so many things that you can do at a tech company without being an engineer. And I will preach that until the day that I die. And I think even now more so, because you think about fields like customer support, you think about things like DevOps, you think about things like security. I'm so happy no one has Zoom bombed us on this call, right? All of those things are going to be in high demand. And a lot of them have already been in demand, to be honest. So I think be open to different possibilities, because the great thing about working in tech is once you get your way in, sky's the limit, right? Like you just have to get in. Prime example, I knew someone, I worked at a consultancy before I worked at General Assembly. And the person that was kind of doing project management and ops for the consultancy now works at Uber doing ops, right? Like was never a part of the plan. She started off as an office manager. For those of you that don't know, I mean, I don't really know what happens to office managers now because we're not in the office. But there's so many, you just kind of like, I don't want to say basic, but there's fundamental roles that every tech company has, and they need people to fill it, even down to customer support. If you're looking for something right now just to pay the bills, tons of companies are looking for those roles right now. And once you find your way in, it's easier for you, to connect to other people within the company, learn about different opportunities that exist within the organization, and it's always much easier to have them move you into a different role once you're already there and you're already getting paid than for you to apply for the role on your own, right? So just be strategic in everything. Keep your mindset open. I think this is obviously an unprecedented time, and a lot of things aren't going to go as we planned, right? Nothing in 2020 has gone according to my plans thus far. So embrace that craziness, and just kind of see where the road takes you.
Oh, this has been so great. Unfortunately, we are a little bit over, so we won't be able to get to Q&A. I know I already saw some of our panelists for the next session hopping on, but Betsy, Kim, Ariel, thank you for your time and your wisdom. Do you have any, I guess, 20-second thoughts or wisdom to leave our folks with before we move on?
Mary, will you send us the questions and maybe we can answer them offline?
Yeah, I'll put them in the chat, actually. That's a great idea. Thank you. And if y'all want to stay on, I can actually just switch you over to attendees and then pull the next group of panelists in. Thank you so much.